Hi and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. 2 years ago, I caught my wife trying to step out on our marriage. She insists that she did nothing wrong and that I misinterpreted the entire thing. Can you give me an outside perspective on my situation? Am I wrong in my assumptions? I am currently in the middle of a divorce after a 13-year marriage. I'm asking my question because I'm trying to find a sense of closure and peace, and this whole situation has remained like an open wound for me, preventing me from achieving the peace and closure I want. I don't deny my own contributions to the failure of my marriage, nor do I even deny how my own behavior even contributed to pushing her towards stepping out on our marriage. But in the end, she made her own choice to do so. For clarity, I had remained loyal to my wife in marriage for the entire life of the relationship. To really understand, we have to go back to the beginning, 13 years ago, when I made the biggest leap of faith in my life for her. We met during a postgraduate program in my home country. She was brilliant, driven, a woman who knew exactly what she wanted from life, and I was completely captivated. Our courtship was a whirlwind of intellectual debates, shared ambitions, and a profound sense of connection that felt like coming home. She was a physician, specializing in a demanding field, and her passion for her work was one of the things I admired most about her. I was, at the time, on a fast track in a lucrative career in finance, a world of numbers and strategies that I was good at, a world that provided me with a strong sense of identity and security. When we decided to get married, she made it clear that her life, her family, and her career were firmly planted in her home country, a beautiful, vibrant place across the ocean. The choice was clear in my mind. A life with her was worth more than any career path. So I left. I left my job, my friends, my family, the entire comfortable framework of my existence, and moved to be with her, believing with all the naive optimism of a man in love that I could simply replicate my success there. That I soon discovered was not the case. The professional landscape was different, the certifications didn't transfer, the networking circles were closed to outsiders. The man who had been a rising star in finance found himself on the bottom rung of a ladder he didn't even recognize. The first few years were a brutal lesson in humility. I took jobs that were far below my skill level just to bring in an income, anything to feel like I was contributing. Each rejection letter, each polite dismissal, chipped away at the foundation of my self-esteem. My wife, in stark contrast, was flourishing. Her career soared. She became a respected specialist, her name known in her field, and with her success came a very clear, very expensive dream: owning property in the heart of the city we lived in, a metropolis where real estate was legendarily pricey. This dream became a silent third partner in our marriage. It was never spoken of as a demand, but it was an ever-present pressure, a benchmark against which my own failures were measured. I could see the desire in her eyes when we'd walk through the affluent neighborhoods, the way she'd look at the grand old buildings. I felt the weight of that dream settle on my shoulders like a physical burden. I wanted to give her that. More than anything, I wanted to be the man who could make her dreams come true, the partner who could stand beside her as an equal. But the years of struggle were taking their toll. I was adrift, losing the man I used to be. The confident, ambitious person she had fallen in love with was being replaced by a shadow, a man haunted by a sense of inadequacy. The financial disparity between us grew into a chasm, and with it, an emotional distance we never learned how to bridge. Our conversations became minefields of unspoken resentments. I felt like a failure, and I projected that onto her, imagining judgment in her silences, disappointment in her gaze. She, in turn, seemed to retreat further into her work, a world where she was competent, successful, and in control. The man she came home to was a constant reminder of a life plan that had gone off course. I was the variable that didn't fit her equation for success. The weight of it all was crushing, and I grew desperate. That desperation led me to a decision that would ultimately shatter what was left of my mental health and our marriage. It was a choice born from the deep-seated need to prove my worth, not just to her, but to myself. I had to find a way to make the kind of money she was making, to level the playing field, to finally help her realize her dream, and in doing so, perhaps salvage my own sense of self-worth. It felt like my last chance to be the man I thought she wanted, the man I had once been. This desperation led me to a job in direct sales, specifically within the timeshare industry. From the outside, it promised the world, a high-income potential based purely on commission, an opportunity to finally climb out of the financial hole I'd been in for years. I saw the dollar signs and convinced myself it was the answer, a way to finally meet my wife on the same financial level. I dove in, ignoring the warning bells that were already ringing in the back of my mind. The reality of the job was a daily assault on my soul. It was a dirty, shady business, built on a foundation of manipulation and high-pressure tactics. My role was to be a predator, to identify people's vacation dreams and twist them into legally binding, financially crippling contracts. I was required to lie, to obfuscate, to be an actor playing the part of a trusted advisor while essentially picking the pockets of hopeful families. Every morning I would put on a suit and a fake smile, and a piece of me would die. This wasn't just a job I disliked. It was a role that was fundamentally antithetical to my entire being. I consider myself an ethical person, someone who values honesty, and here I was, becoming the very definition of a lying, unethical sack of shit. Naturally, I was terrible at it. I couldn't bring myself to fully commit to the deception. My sales numbers were abysmal and the pressure from management was relentless. The environment was toxic, a shark tank where only the most ruthless survived. The effect on my mental health was catastrophic. The constant moral conflict, the self-loathing, the financial stress, and the ever-present feeling of failure at home all converged into a perfect storm. I began to unravel. Anxiety became my constant companion, followed by a deep, numbing depression. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and the confident man I once was felt like a distant memory, a character from someone else's life. I was heading for a full-blown mental breakdown, and it was happening right in the middle of our already fractured marriage. During this dark and terrifying period, my wife offered no emotional support. It wasn't just a lack of support, it was an active hostility. When I tried to talk to her about the job, about the way it was destroying me, she would dismiss my struggles. She saw it as weakness, another failure to add to the list. Her responses were cold, clipped, and often laced with contempt. It was obvious to me that mentally and emotionally she had already checked out of the relationship. There was no empathy, no kindness, just the icy silence of a partner who had long since stopped seeing me as a partner. It felt like I was drowning and she was standing on the shore, watching with her arms crossed. Our home, which should have been a sanctuary, became another source of pressure and pain. Her hostility was a constant, tangible presence in the house, a suffocating atmosphere that made my breakdown inevitable. And then, it happened. In the middle of a high-pressure sales meeting, something inside me just snapped. The carefully constructed facade I had been maintaining for months finally crumbled, and I fell apart completely. The breakdown was severe, leaving me unable to function, unable to work, unable to even think straight. It was the lowest point of my life, a terrifying plunge into darkness, and I had to navigate it utterly alone. In the midst of this personal hell, our 10th wedding anniversary arrived. It fell on a workday and passed with all the fanfare of a tax deadline. There was no card, no special dinner, not even a heartfelt happy anniversary. The silence from her was deafening, a confirmation of everything I already felt. The marriage, for all intents and purposes, was a hollow shell. Still, a desperate, foolish part of me clung to hope. I thought that maybe, just maybe, we could use the upcoming weekend to reconnect. I envisioned a quiet dinner, a walk, anything to try and find a flicker of the love that once existed between us. I wanted to try to rekindle something, to find a reason to keep fighting. That same week, as I was tentatively trying to piece my shattered psyche back together, she dropped the news. She announced, casually, that she was going out to dinner with her longtime friend. This friend was also her boss at a private clinic she worked for part-time. I was immediately taken aback. This was supposed to be our anniversary weekend, the weekend I was pinning all my pathetic hopes on, and she had already made plans to spend it with someone else. A cold, heavy feeling began to settle in my stomach. I knew this man, or at least I knew of him. He was a very successful and wealthy physician, married, with a well-known history of infidelity. I had always felt an undercurrent of something inappropriate in the way she spoke about him, a little too much admiration, a little too much familiarity. My intuition, a sense I've learned to trust over my lifetime as it has rarely been wrong, started screaming. I felt more than knew where things were going. The energy in the room shifted. Her casual announcement was not a request for permission. It was a statement of fact. But I chose not to say anything. I swallowed the words of protest, the questions, the accusations. A part of me didn't want to know the answers, and another, darker part wanted to see what she would do. So I just nodded, a silent observer in the final act of my own marriage. The day of her dinner date arrived, and a heavy, suffocating silence filled our home. I watched her get ready, my silence a form of passive resistance, a refusal to participate in the charade. I sat on the edge of the bed, a spectator at a play where my own heart was being methodically dismantled. I observed every detail of her transformation. It wasn't the routine preparation for a night out. It was a ritual of intent. She spent an unusually long time in the shower, the sound of the water a steady hum against the frantic beating of my own heart. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel, the scent of expensive, floral perfume, one I hadn't smelled on her in years, filled the air. She laid out her clothes on the bed, not her usual comfortable, elegant attire, but something else entirely. It was a dress that was designed to be seen, a deep crimson that clung to her body, far more provocative than anything I had seen her wear in our entire 13 years together. She dressed to the nines, a level of effort that was so glaringly out of place for a friendly dinner with a platonic colleague. As she sat at her vanity, applying her makeup with meticulous care, her reflection in the mirror seemed like that of a stranger. This was not the woman I had married, the woman who favored a natural look and understated elegance. This was a woman on a mission, a woman preparing for a conquest. Every brushstroke, every application of mascara felt like a deliberate act of defiance, a statement aimed directly at me. Again, I could feel more than know where her energy was and what her intentions were, and it just broke my heart into a million tiny pieces. My intuition wasn't just whispering anymore. It was a deafening siren screaming at me that this was not an innocent dinner. It was a calculated betrayal in the making. Still, I said nothing. I remained a statue on the bed, my silence my only weapon, my only shield. I wanted to see it through. I wanted to see what she was capable of, how far she was willing to go. When she finally finished, she stood and looked at herself in the full-length mirror, a final inspection. She looked stunning, and the sight of her, so beautifully prepared for another man, was a physical blow. She turned to leave, and for a moment I thought she might say something, offer some flimsy explanation, but she didn't even look at me. She simply walked out the door. The click of the lock behind her was the most final sound I had ever heard. In that moment my heart didn't just break, it shattered. The floodgates I had been holding back burst open, and I collapsed, sobbing, a broken man in an empty home. The hours that followed were a blur of agony. I paced the rooms, my mind a torture chamber of images and scenarios. I replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for the point where it all went wrong, the moment she had decided that I was no longer enough. The night stretched on, an eternity of waiting and wondering. Midnight came and went. Then 1 a.m., then 2 a.m. With every passing hour, the hope that I was wrong, that my intuition had finally failed me, dwindled and died. She finally came home around 3 a.m. I was in bed, the lights off, but I was wide awake, my body rigid with a mixture of anger and grief. I heard her key in the door, her quiet movements as she came into the bedroom. She leaned in for a goodnight kiss, a routine gesture that suddenly felt like the ultimate violation. I turned my head away, and the confrontation I had been avoiding all night finally erupted. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice raw with unshed tears. All hell broke loose. She was immediately defensive, launching into a tirade about my lack of trust. She denied everything, of course, claiming it was just an innocent dinner with a friend, that they had simply lost track of time talking. The argument was a chaotic mess of accusations, denials, and tears. In the middle of it all, in a moment of unguarded anger, she let something slip. She yelled, "It's not like he even paid me any attention." The words hung in the air between us, a confession wrapped in a complaint. My interpretation of that slip was immediate and absolute. She had gone out with the clear intention of stepping out, of soliciting an advance, but her friend had, for whatever reason, rejected her. The evening's failure was not for a lack of trying on her part. She tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. The truth, or at least her version of it, was out. The rest of her excuses, that she dressed up nice simply because she wanted to, that she came home late because they were just talking, crumbled into dust in the face of that one revealing sentence. The next day, the house was thick with a toxic, unspoken tension. We moved around each other like ghosts, the raw wounds of the previous night's confrontation still bleeding. As I numbly went about the routine of household chores, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in the wreckage, I started a load of laundry. I gathered up the clothes she had worn on her dinner date, the crimson dress a painful reminder in my hands. As I was going through her things, sorting them for the wash, my hand closed around something in the bottom of the hamper. It was lingerie. Not just any lingerie, but a matching set of black lace from Victoria's Secret. This was a woman who, for the entire 10 years I had known her since our wedding, had almost exclusively worn plain, boring granny panties and simple, mismatched bras. She was, in many ways, a bit of a prude, and she rarely, if ever, wore things like this, not even for me on special occasions. The sight of it was a gut punch. It was the final, irrefutable piece of evidence that annihilated any lingering shred of doubt I might have had. This wasn't something you wore for a friendly dinner. This was armor for a seduction, an outfit chosen with a very specific purpose in mind. Holding the delicate, expensive lace in my hands, I felt a cold wave of certainty wash over me. The slip of the tongue the night before had been the confession. This was the premeditated proof. I walked back into the bedroom, the lingerie in my hand, and confronted her again. I didn't yell. My voice was eerily calm, the voice of a man who had already accepted the worst. I held it up and challenged her stance that it had been just an innocent evening. A flash of surprise, perhaps even panic, crossed her face. I assume it was because she hadn't thought I would find it, that this detail of her deception would remain hidden. But the surprise quickly hardened back into defiance. She insisted again that she had worn it just because. Then, grasping for a plausible explanation, she invented a new detail to her story, claiming she had attended a formal event earlier that previous day, which is why she had been so dolled up. The entire performance had the unmistakable air of backtracking and panicked self-defense. Her lies were becoming more elaborate, more tangled, but they were also becoming more transparent. Within a couple of days, her demeanor shifted entirely. The hostility and denial gave way to what appeared to be genuine remorse. She apologized profusely, crying, telling me how sorry she was for the hurt she had caused, for her poor judgment. She never admitted to her intention, but she acknowledged the pain her actions had inflicted. I was still completely devastated, a hollowed-out shell of a man. My initial, raw reaction had been to end the marriage immediately, to pack my bags and walk away from the smoldering ruins of our life together. But I took her apology to heart. I saw her tears, I heard the regret in her voice, and a foolish, desperate part of me wanted to believe that maybe this was something we could move past. For the sake of the 13 years we had shared, for the memory of the love we once had, I thought perhaps we could rebuild from the ashes. It was a fragile, tentative hope, but it was hope nonetheless. Unfortunately, that hope was short-lived. About a month later, I discovered that she had completely and utterly changed her story. The remorse was gone, replaced by an unshakable, indignant denial. She now insisted that she had done absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing had happened. I had imagined the entire thing, and in fact, I was the one who was in the wrong for daring to accuse her of such a thing. It felt like she had poured a gallon of salt on an already gaping wound. It was a real kick in the balls, a betrayal that felt even deeper than the original one because it was a deliberate attempt to rewrite reality, to make me question my own sanity. This became her default position from that moment on. She remained adamant in her version of events, even as our marriage continued to crumble around us, and she maintains that position even now, in the middle of our divorce. The gaslighting was absolute. A couple of weeks after that fateful night, in a cruel twist of irony, I came into a large inheritance. A relative I was close to passed away, leaving me a substantial amount of money. Foolishly, naively, I saw it as a sign. I thought that the money, this sudden windfall, could be the solution to our problems. I believed that if I could finally remove the financial pressure, if I could give her the life she dreamed of, we could fix what was broken. I spent the next 2 years and most of that money trying to make things work. We went to couples counseling. We took lavish vacations. I invested in business ventures to try and rebuild my career. I did everything I could to bridge the chasm between us, but it was all for nothing. The money did not resolve anything. It was like trying to patch a sinking ship with banknotes. In hindsight, I can see with painful clarity that our marriage ended that night when she walked out the door in her red dress and black lingerie. It ended for me, at least. Nothing could have saved it. I was just too attached, too invested, and too afraid to let go of the life I had built, even if that life was a lie. I spent those last 2 years harboring a deep, corrosive anger and resentment towards her. That night would come up time and time again in our arguments, a ghost that could never be exorcised. And she remained insistent the entire time that she had done nothing wrong, and that I was the crazy one for even thinking it. This has been a deep, unresolved wound in my heart for over 2 years now, and try as I may, I have not been able to shake it. I desire greatly to find closure so that I can finally let this go, to be able to heal and release all the anger and resentment I feel towards her. It's like a poison in my soul, and I deeply desire to be rid of it. What I really want, what I need, is another perspective, because there is a small, tormented part of me that truly wants to believe her, but a much greater, more rational part of me that simply can't. I have been in conflict with myself about it for so long. The truth is that I have no definitive proof of what really happened that night on her dinner date. She could have gone and had her brains fucked out, or it could have been a completely innocent dinner between friends, however unlikely that seems. I honestly don't know for certain. The best benefit of the doubt I can grant her, based on her own accidental admission, is that she went out that night with the full intention of stepping out on me, but for whatever reason, she just wasn't able to secure what she wanted. My question to you is, am I wrong in my conclusion? Am I seeing things that were never there? And even if I'm not, even in the best case scenario where nothing physical happened, did I overreact in seeing her intent as a profound act of cheating? Is the intention to betray just as bad as the act itself? My heart and mind are really at a loss to provide me with a conclusion that can offer me peace with this. I would greatly appreciate your take and your opinion on the matter, no matter what it is. I just need a different set of eyes to see it and to give me their honest opinion. Apologies for the length of my rant, but as I stated earlier, this has been and still is a massive open wound for me. Thank you in advance for your insights. Thank you for listening to my story here on Reddit Whispers. Now I want to hear from you. What's the most unexpected life-changing decision you've ever made when everything seemed to fall apart? Share your thoughts in a comment section, because you never know, you might be the one that someone else needs to hear today.